Okay, let's unpack this. Imagine it is November 24th, 1971.
Right, the day before Thanksgiving.
A time when air travel felt almost luxurious, certainly casual. A man walks onto Northwest Orient Airlines Flight 305, Portland to Seattle. He looks completely ordinary.
Just another guy in a suit. Dark business suit, tie, looks to be in his mid-40s.
He orders a bourbon and soda, lights a cigarette on the plane, and then, in an act that would fundamentally change aviation security forever, he hands a simple note to a flight attendant.
And with that single whispered interaction, that man known to history by the accidental name of D.B. Cooper launched the only truly unsolved skyjacking in U.S. aviation history.
And this story, it's not just about a crime.
No, it's about the creation of an American legend.
So our mission in this deep dive is to move well past the pop culture mythology. You know, the cheap sunglasses, the action movie versions, the endless conspiracy theories.
Right.
We're going to sink our teeth into the actual source material you've provided. We need to analyze the volatile historical context that made this whole thing possible.
And dissect the evidence. The minimal, often paradoxical physical evidence that was left behind.
And fully grasp the enormous sociological shockwaves this one jump created across the entire country.
Well, the central paradox of this case is exactly why it endures. Cooper was, in legal and factual terms, a serious criminal. He committed extortion, threatened mass violence.
No question.
Yet the way he did it with composure, almost politeness, and then his disappearance, it transformed him into something else entirely.
He's not remembered as a terrorist.
Not at all. He is the ultimate folk anti-hero, the polite pirate, who in a time of this profound, rising institutional distrust, managed to stick it to the system, take a massive pile of cash, and quite literally vanish into the night.
That act of vanishing, that's the core of his legend.
It is.
So let's start with that groundwork. When we look at the source material, the key takeaway is that this crime wasn't just lucky.
No.
It was made possible by a systemic vulnerability that was just baked into 1971 America.
Exactly. To understand Cooper, you have to understand the era. The early 1970s was a period of national exhaustion and, frankly, paranoia.
You had the lingering, debilitating fatigue of the Vietnam War.
You had severe economic anxiety, inflation, and most critically, you had this rapidly accelerating distrust of all federal institutions. A distrust that was about to be blown wide open by Watergate.
So people felt disillusioned.
Deeply. And when institutions appear fragile, the mythology of the rogue individual, it just flourishes.
So the psychological environment was ripe for a renegade, but the physical environment of air travel, that was unbelievably vulnerable too.
The vulnerability was total. I mean, this period is appropriately called the golden age of hijacking.
Wow.
And it was terrifying precisely because it was so commonplace. The sources show there were well over 150 skyjacking attempts in the U.S. between just 1968 and 1972.
150.
And most of these were politically motivated, people seeking passage to Cuba or demanding some kind of political action. But the sheer volume shows you just how easily the air system could be manipulated.
And when you look at the security standards of the time, they are staggering in their absence.
It speaks to a level of complacency we can hardly imagine today. Flying was treated like getting on a bus.
Right.
The whole system was based on trust, not deterrence. We were talking about absolutely minimal security.
No mandatory ID checks for passengers.
Nope. No federal air marshals, and most importantly, no metal detectors.
Why not?
The costs of installing them were deemed too high, and the perception was that they would inconvenience the passenger experience, slow down travel.
And the cockpit doors?
Often left unlocked, or they just had these flimsy latches that could be easily defeated. A dedicated, prepared individual could board a flight with minimal difficulty and maximum threat.
So the system wasn't just vulnerable, it was essentially an open invitation to a determined criminal.
It was, and Cooper was clearly determined.
But before we get to the act itself, we have to address the confusion around his name. The legend we know is built on, a media typo.
It's incredible, isn't it? A figure of this historical importance is fundamentally misidentified because of a simple journalistic error. The man who boarded the plane, he purchased a one-way $20 ticket under the name Dan Cooper.
Dan Cooper. So where did DB come from?
The moniker that stuck DB Cooper came later. When the FBI started its investigation, the early frantic media coverage was based on fragments of information.
A leak.
Sort of. A reporter contacted the FBI's Portland field office about a local man named DB Cooper who had been briefly questioned but, quickly cleared.
Yeah.
The reporter, likely mishearing or just misunderstanding the tip, ran the name as the hijacker's alias. And because the case became an instant national sensation, the name D.D. Cooper was cemented in the public mind before the error could ever be corrected.
So the real name, Dan Cooper, never had a chance.
Never stood a chance.
The sources also point out that the name Dan Cooper wasn't necessarily random, right? It might have been a deliberate choice referencing a comic book character.
That's right. There was a popular Franco-Belgian comic strip, Dan Cooper, featuring a heroic Canadian Royal Air Force pilot.
Interesting.
Yeah, so if our hijacker was a fan, or just aware of this specific cultural artifact, it suggests a profound level of calculated identity creation. It hints at a deep aviation connection, or, at the very least, a prepared persona designed to evoke competence.
It moves this act from just a spontaneous crime
To carefully staged theater.
which perfectly sets the stage for the heist itself. It wasn't sloppy. It was performed with an almost, professional detachment.
That's a great way to put it.
So let's move into the cabin of Northwest Orient Flight 305. The sources paint this very specific picture of Cooper's demeanor, and it's critical to understanding his anti-hero status. He was unnervingly calm.
That composure is the key psychological component. He was described by the flight crew, notably flight attendant Florence Schaffner, as being in his mid-40s, wearing a pressed dark business suit, a crisp white shirt, a black tie secured by a mother-of-pearl tie clip.
He didn't look like a fanatic or a desperate man.
No, he looked like a manager waiting for a layover. He ordered his bourbon and soda, lit a cigarette, and then handed the note to Schaffner.
And she initially thought he was just a lonely businessman hitting on her, right? She just put the note in her purse without reading it.
Correct. She even offered to take his drink order again. It was the whisper that followed that shattered the normalcy. "Miss, you'd better look at that note. I have a bomb."
And then he showed her the briefcase.
He did. Inside were what appeared to be 8 red cylinders wired to a large battery, and that whisper, not a shout, is critical.
Why?
It established absolute, terrifying situational dominance, but in a way that minimized passenger panic and maximized his control. He demonstrated power without devolving into cruelty.
And once he had control, his demands were incredibly precise. This is where his preparation really shines through.
The precision is evidence of specialized planning. He didn't just ask for a bag of cash. He demanded $200,000 in unmarked negotiable U.S. currency.
And he specified the bills.
He specified $20 bills. Now, if he had demanded hundreds, the physical bulk would have been much smaller. But 20s are more common and, crucially, harder to trace in a large number of transactions. The money weighed about 21 pounds.
But wait, if the money was unmarked, the source material says he knew the FBI would record the serial numbers. That seems counterintuitive if you're planning on spending it.
That's a crucial point, and it's one that historians have focused on for decades. The FBI, of course, was frantically recording all 10,000 serial numbers.
So if Cooper survived, spending that money would have been nearly impossible.
For a very long time, yes. The FBI circulated those lists to banks globally. The fact that he knew enough to demand unmarked bills but accepted the recorded serial numbers suggests a few possibilities.
Okay, like what?
One, he didn't care because he never intended to spend it. Maybe it was just the ultimate act of defiance. 2, he was so confident in his escape plan that he believed he could wait out the intense scrutiny for years, even decades.
Or 3.
Or 3, and perhaps this is the most probable, he needed the specific denominations, the 20s, and the specific weight for the jump itself, and the risk of traceability was secondary to the immediate logistical need for the cash.
He also demanded 4 parachutes, and he specifically noted a backpack parachute.
Yes, 4 parachutes, 2 primary and 2 reserves. The specificity of the backpack chute confirms he had some knowledge of parachute nomenclature.
Well, why 4?
That remains a deep point of speculation. As the sources suggest, it might have been an attempt to confuse law enforcement, leaving them guessing if he had accomplices. Or, more likely, it was a practical matter. He needed 1 functional chute for himself, and possibly 1 for spare parts or to help secure the money bag. And, as we'll discuss later, his decision regarding one of the non-functional chutes proves he understood the equipment.
So the plane lands in Seattle. This was the point of maximum vulnerability, but he controlled the situation perfectly.
Flawlessly. He exchanged the 36 passengers for the ransom money and the parachutes.
And that action letting the passengers go, that's a huge part of the anti-hero mythology, isn't it?
It's massive. He satisfied his financial demands without spilling a drop of blood or taking a single hostage beyond the crew necessary for the next part of the flight. This lack of gratuitous cruelty cemented his public image as the gentleman bandit.
Okay, so the exchange is complete. The Northwest Orient Boeing 727 Flight 305 takes off again with just Cooper and the minimal flight crew. Where are they going?
He instructed them to fly to Mexico City, but the flight plan was bizarre.
How so?
It was incredibly specific, tailored precisely for a jump from the aft stairway of the 727. He ordered the plane to fly at the minimum possible speed, about 100 knots, and at the minimum possible altitude, which was 10,000 feet.
Why 10,000 feet? That seems arbitrarily low for a commercial jet.
It wasn't arbitrary at all. It was an operational necessity, and it reveals key knowledge of the 727. The Boeing 727, unlike many modern planes, could not fly with its rear stairs lowered if the cabin was pressurized. To safely open those stairs, the cabin pressure had to equalize with the outside atmosphere.
Which happens at around 10,000 feet.
Exactly. If he had tried this at a cruising altitude of, say, 30,000 feet, the explosive pressure differential would have ripped the stairs right off the plane. Or worse. So 10,000 feet meant the plane was flying safely, but slowly and exposed.
He also ordered the landing gear to remain down and the flaps to be lowered 15 degrees. What was the purpose of that?
Maximum drag. Keeping the gear down and the flaps extended meant the plane had to burn huge amounts of fuel and maintain that slow speed.
And that was vital for a parajump.
Absolutely. A slower speed gives the jumper a better chance of a clean exit without slamming into the tail section, and it minimizes the wind blast, increasing the chances of deploying the chute successfully and surviving the initial shock. This all points back to specialized knowledge.
And then came the final moment, over the rugged, black, stormy terrain of southwestern Washington.
Somewhere between Seattle and Reno. The jump occurred at precisely 8:13 p.m. Captain Scott was in the cockpit. Flight attendant Tina Mucklow was the only crew member left with Cooper in the main cabin.
Then what did she see?
Just before the jump, she saw Cooper tying the money bag around his waist using cord he likely stripped from one of the non-functional parachutes. He put on the remaining chute and then lowered the aft stairs.
How did the crew in the cockpit know exactly when he left?
They noticed a change in the cockpit pressure altimeter reading and a distinct thump noise. The pressure warning light for the open door flickered on and then went steady. Cooper was gone.
He jumped into what?
Into zero visibility, freezing rain from 10,000 feet over a massive search area of dense evergreen forest, ravines, and the churning Columbia River. And he was wearing a business suit and, according to most accounts, thin street shoes.
That, to any rational person, sounds less like a planned escape and more like a high-altitude suicide attempt.
That is the ultimate conclusion of the FBI's professional demise theory. The sheer violence of the environment, the wind shear, the near-zero temperatures, the terrain, all point to a fatality. The romance of the escape quickly fades when you consider the brutal physics of a jump on that night.
So the moment the 727 landed, the largest manhunt in U.S. history began, focused initially on that estimated drop zone.
Right, and the FBI immediately formalized the investigation. They gave it the official code name N-or-Jack, short for Northwest Hijacking.
And the scale was?
Monumental. It spanned decades, involved agents and staff from multiple states. They interviewed hundreds of potential witnesses, and ultimately investigated over 800 named suspects. It became a permanent fixture in the agency's historical record.
For 9 years, though, the trail was stone cold. No parachute, no body, no sign of the money.
Nothing. Until 1980, when the only definitive physical evidence surfaced.
The Tina Bar money.
That's the famous discovery. In 1980, an 8-year-old boy named Brian Ingram was raking sand near the Columbia River at a recreational area called Tina Bar in Vancouver, Washington.
And what did he find?
He found 3 packets of the ransom money, severely decomposed, held together by rubber bands, totaling $5,880.
Wow. That finding should have provided clarity, right? It should have narrowed the search.
You'd think so, but it only created a deeper mystery.
Yeah.
It complicated everything. The money was found upstream from the primary search zones that the FBI had established based on their sophisticated wind and trajectory modeling.
So if Cooper landed near the calculated drop zone, how did the money end up 8 miles north of it?
This led to 2 major lines of speculation, which continue to this day.
Let's explore those. What's the first one?
The first one argues for natural hydrological deposition. The theory here is that Cooper landed near the river, or in the river, and died. His money bag then broke apart.
And the river carried it.
It's theorized that the money, having sunk, was later unearthed by a large dredging operation on the river in 1974, which then deposited the sand and the cash at Tina Bar. This theory supports the FBI's belief that he died on impact.
And the second line of thought.
This is the more romantic and arguably more frustrating theory, that the FBI original flight path and wind models were just plain wrong.
So maybe Cooper landed far north of the predicted zone.
Exactly. Or maybe he even managed to travel, burying the cash, only for the river to reclaim it years later. Regardless, the single piece of physical evidence essentially invalidated 9 years of search parameters.
Before we move on to the suspects, we need to completely dismantle this persistent parachute myth because it fundamentally changes how we view his preparation.
This is a critical correction based on the sources. The myth, as you know, states that Cooper jumped with a non-functional training chute, a dummy chute that had been sewn shut.
Right, the idea that he was an amateur who doomed himself.
The truth is more nuanced. 4 chutes were delivered. One was indeed a non-functional training chute, and another had been relined for display purposes, making it suspect. However, Cooper's specific demand for a backpack parachute and his calm demeanor suggests he knew exactly what he needed.
And the analysis confirms he used his knowledge to select the right one.
Yes. Evidence and FBI analysis strongly suggest he recognized the non-functional chute and used it for its components, probably stripping nylon cord or harness material to secure the heavy $200,000 to his body.
And he jumped with one of the good ones?
He likely jumped using one of the 2 fully functional chutes delivered to the plane. This elevates him significantly from a suicidal amateur to a highly discerning specialist who knew how to adapt his equipment under intense pressure.
That distinction, amateur versus specialist, is crucial, especially when we look at the most modern forensic clue we have, the titanium clue. The case was suspended in 2016, but citizen investigation continued.
And this is a classic example of modern science bringing cold cases back to life. In 2022, researchers used electron microscopy on the one tangible item Cooper left behind, his black clip-on tie.
What did they find?
They found microscopic particles deeply embedded in the fibers. These weren't just common dust. They were particles of pure titanium and specific rare earth elements like antimony and bismuth.
Okay, so why does finding pure titanium and antimony on a tie worn by a man in 1971 suggest anything specific?
Because in 1971, these were not common materials. Pure titanium was used almost exclusively in highly specialized high-heat applications, think aerospace, jet components, or specialized metallurgical processes.
And the other elements?
Antimony and bismuth are rare earth elements often used as hardening agents or catalysts in specialized chemical or electronics manufacturing.
So this points directly to the Pacific Northwest industrial base.
Absolutely. It aligns the suspect profile strongly with the insider specialist theory. Boeing, which was headquartered in Seattle and manufactured the 727, was a massive consumer of pure titanium.
So he could have worked at Boeing.
Or a company like Tektronix in Oregon, a major electronics and chemical firm which used these rare earth elements. The evidence suggests Cooper wasn't just a random thief, he was likely a technician, an engineer, or a manager with access to or intimate knowledge of the aerospace or heavy manufacturing industries in the region.
But wait, how do we square that titanium clue, this signature of a highly specialized aerospace professional, with the low-tech, almost amateurish nature of the jump itself? That paradox is the core of the Cooper mystery.
That is the essential conflict that drives the enduring debate. If he was a sophisticated insider, why did he choose a plan that was essentially a suicide mission? Why use a method that demanded a jump into freezing conditions in a business suit?
It suggests the high-tech expertise was in the planning and execution leading up to the jump, the knowledge of the 727, the choice of parachutes, the specific demands.
But perhaps not in the survival skills required after the jump. Maybe he had industrial knowledge, but no real-world skydiving or wilderness experience. The titanium suggests the identity, while the jump conditions suggest the feat.
Precisely. The expertise was technical, logistical, and extortionary, not necessarily focused on rugged outdoor survival. He may have been able to build a jet engine component, but couldn't survive a night in the Cascades.
That's the theory.
The moment Cooper jumped, he created not just an instant legend, but a permanent structural change in the way the world flies. The sources are clear. He fundamentally altered air travel for every single person alive today.
He is responsible for closing the architectural loophole he exploited. The immediate aviation security changes were non-negotiable and globally adopted.
And the most famous direct physical consequence is known universally in the aviation world as the Cooper vane.
That's right.
So walk us through the mechanics of the Cooper vane. How did it work and how quickly was it installed?
The vane, sometimes called the Cooper vane or the Cooper lock, is a pretty simple mechanical aerodynamic wedge. It was installed on the underside of the fuselage of the Boeing 727, specifically near the aft stairs.
And what did it do?
When the aircraft was in flight and generating aerodynamic pressure, the vane would drop down and physically prevent the rear stairs from being lowered. It made the infamous Cooper loophole absolutely impossible to use again.
So that modification was mandatory.
Mandatory and implemented across the entire 727 fleet within about a year of the hijacking.
That's a direct physical monument to his crime. But beyond fixing that specific flaw, his success, coupled with the immediate wave of copycat hijackings that followed, accelerated broader systemic changes that we now completely take for granted.
Well, the copycats, which included Richard McCoy, who we'll discuss, proved the plan was viable. It forced the FAA and the White House to act decisively.
So Cooper became the single greatest catalyst for implementing mandatory physical screening.
He did. Prior to Cooper, the idea was dismissed as too costly and cumbersome. But starting in 1973, the FAA mandated that all U.S. airports install metal detectors and require mandatory X-ray screening of all carry-on baggage.
So if you wait in line at a TSA checkpoint today, you are, in a very real sense, honoring the legacy of D.B. Cooper.
It's true. He is the unintended father of modern airport security. He forced a shift in thinking from trust-based travel to deterrence-based screening. The costs and inconvenience were subtly justified.
Let's pivot to the psychological impact. We mentioned his anti-hero status, but why did the public embrace him so completely? Why did a criminal act become romanticized?
Again, we have to return to the environment of 1971. Cooper became the perfect canvas for public frustration. He was seen as a rogue, a highly intelligent individual who managed to outwit every institutional authority thrown at him: the FBI, the FAA, corporate security, the military.
And he did this while maintaining this perverse code of honor.
Exactly. He was polite, he threatened only property, and he harmed no one.
He became the ultimate embodiment of the fantasy of escape.
Absolutely. In a highly regulated, increasingly corporate and tracked society, the idea of a man simply dissolving his identity, escaping all financial worries with a huge pile of untraceable cash, and just vanishing. It resonated deeply.
Freedom from identity, freedom from constraints.
And most importantly, triumph over faceless governmental authority at a moment when that authority was being questioned on every front. He satisfied a collective psychological need for an outlaw who operated with this strange sense of control and civility.
It's why he's a cultural touchstone. The sources refer to him as the progenitor of the modern true crime obsession.
He is the ghost in the machine of American true crime. He set the gold standard for the unsolved mystery. You see references everywhere. Prison Break, the famous fan theories connecting him to Mad Men's identity crisis.
Even Loki on Disney+.
Tiffin Loki. The fact that the FBI formally suspended its active investigation in 2016 only amplified his legend. It was an institutional admission of defeat, confirming that the mystery's power outlasts any federal resource.
Decades of investigation, 800+ suspects, one small pile of decomposed money, and a tie covered in titanium dust. The central debate remains polarized. Did Dan Cooper survive the jump, or did he perish?
The FBI, after their exhaustive Norjack investigation, officially leans heavily toward the professional demise theory. They acknowledge his specialized knowledge, the choice of the 727 understanding the aft stairs, the parachute nomenclature.
But they conclude that the jump conditions were simply insurmountable.
Yes, even for an experienced skydiver.
The odds were stacked against him by the environment, not just by gravity.
Precisely. Freezing temperatures, gale force winds, zero visibility, jumping over rugged, unexplored terrain in non-survival gear. The consensus among skydiving experts and the FBI is that wind shear, or the landing itself, hitting dense nugless firs or steep ravine walls, would have been instantly fatal.
And the Tina Bar money discovery supports that.
It does. While confusing the location, it supports the idea that the money was eventually scattered by water, which points strongly to his death near or in the Columbia River Valley shortly after the jump.
But the alternative, the insider specialist theory, pushes back on the demise conclusion by focusing on his precision.
That theory, championed by many citizen researchers, argues that Cooper's preparation was simply too specific for a suicide mission. They suggest he wasn't just planning to jump anywhere.
He had a target.
He may have had intimate knowledge of the local terrain, or even a planned clandestine landing zone, perhaps a remote logging road or a private airstrip. He was a specialist, and specialists plan for survival. The theory posits that he simply missed his intended target due to the unexpected severity of the storm and the massive wind shear.
The skydiving professionals who handled the equipment at the airport were often quoted about the viability of the jump itself. What did they say?
Earl Causey, who provided the actual chutes, was one of the loudest proponents of the death jump conclusion. He emphasized that even a highly skilled skydiver would never attempt a night jump in such conditions.
And to do it in street clothes and street shoes?
Was essentially suicide. They argue that if Cooper had experience, he would have canceled or refused the jump. The act of jumping itself under those circumstances suggests desperation or overconfidence, not meticulous professional skill.
So let's turn to the suspects. Because Cooper's methods were so unique, they inspired immediate copycats. We have to start with Richard Floyd McCoy Jr.
McCoy is the perfect cautionary tale for Cooper. Just 5 months later, in April 1972, McCoy hijacked a United Airlines 727, demanding $500,000, and parachuted over Utah.
And he was, in many ways, the perfect suspect profile.
Incredibly skilled pilot, an Army Green Beret, a Vietnam veteran, and a competitive skydiver. He was, in short, everything people imagined Cooper to be in terms of expertise.
So why was McCoy immediately ruled out as the actual D.B. Cooper?
Several reasons. First, he was caught quickly. He left careless clues, his fingerprints on a magazine, and crucially, his handwriting was matched to the ransom note.
Okay.
Second, eyewitness descriptions didn't match perfectly. Third, and perhaps most importantly, the logistics were slightly different. McCoy demanded a functional military-grade jump, whereas Cooper accepted a mix of amateur and dysfunctional gear, relying on his ability to adapt.
So the FBI concluded he was a copycat.
A brazen copycat, yes. Proving the viability of the plan, but not the survival of the original. McCoy eventually escaped prison using a fake gun and was later killed in a shootout with FBI agents.
The sources show the FBI investigated over 800 suspects. Let's look at the three most compelling, starting with Robert Rackstraw. He got a lot of media attention in recent years.
Robert Rackstraw was a former Army pilot and demolition expert with special operations experience. He had a striking physical resemblance to the police sketch, and his military background certainly aligns with the specific knowledge of parachutes and aviation required.
What weighed against him, though?
Primarily, Rackstraw was checked out thoroughly in 1978 and eventually cleared by the FBI, although some citizen investigators remained convinced until his death in 2019. The main issue was definitive proof. While his profile fit the professional theory, there was no direct connection.
Okay, next, let's consider Kenneth Christensen, who provides a direct link to that titanium clue we talked about.
Christensen was a former Northwest Orient flight mechanic and manager from the Seattle area. His connection is compelling because he had intimate technical knowledge of the 727 aircraft, the exact kind of knowledge required.
And as a Boeing employee?
He would have had direct access to or worked around the pure titanium used in specialized components, perfectly matching the recent forensic evidence found on the tie.
But the FBI also cleared him, or at least didn't pursue him aggressively. Why?
The initial identification came decades after the fact, based on family memories, and a slightly different physical description than the initial flight crew report. And the FBI at the time really held the belief that Cooper was a paratrooper or skydiver, a profile Christensen didn't fit as closely.
And finally, Sheridan Peterson, the veteran who seemed to enjoy teasing his involvement.
Sheridan Peterson was perhaps the most entertaining candidate for the public. He was a veteran smoke jumper, so he had extensive parachute and wilderness survival experience, and he also worked for Boeing as a technical editor.
The perfect combination.
He had it all! And he was famously coy about his potential involvement, often writing articles and letters that heavily hinted he was Cooper.
So why isn't he the accepted answer?
Despite the compelling profile and the public teasing, Peterson never confessed, and there was no definitive physical evidence tying him to the crime. His height and build were also slightly off from the initial crew descriptions. Ultimately, the FBI had to rely on hard evidence, not self-promotional ambiguity.
The investigations show that even with deep dives into these men's lives, the case always returns to the fact that there is simply no definitive link.
It's the ultimate intellectual puzzle. The Norjack investigation was a masterpiece of old-school police work, but they were defeated by a dark, stormy night and a dense, vast search area. The technological limitations of 1971, combined with Cooper's immediate disappearance, made the critical first 48 hours completely useless.
And that allowed the legend to take hold where the facts failed.
Exactly.
So let's step back and analyze the enduring shadow of this case. The D.B. Cooper legend is powerful, but when we look critically at the sources, we see it's a double-edged sword.
The positives are clear. The crime served as a catalyst for crucial life-saving aviation safety improvements. The Cooper vein, mandatory screening. And the case itself provides this perpetual intellectual puzzle that drives historical research, forensic analysis, and the continuous refinement of cold case investigation techniques.
But the romantic narrative, the gentleman bandit trope, that definitely comes at a cost, particularly for the people who were actually on that plane.
That is a critical point the sources ensure we don't forget. While Cooper didn't physically harm anyone, romanticizing the crime whitewashes the severe, long-term trauma experienced by the flight crew.
Florence Schaffner and Tina Mucklow.
They were terrorized by a genuine bomb threat. They were isolated, forced to participate in an act of extortion, and then subjected to intense FBI scrutiny for years afterward. The crime was terrifying, and that reality is often lost when we celebrate the outlaw's escape.
That distinction between the romanticized escape and the actual criminal act, that seems to change depending on cultural perspective.
It does. Cultural comparison is very insightful here. In the United States, Cooper is fundamentally interpreted as the individual rebel, a symbol of freedom.
But elsewhere,
But if you look at how this crime is viewed in cultures with traditionally stricter, more hierarchy-focused systems in places like Japan or Korea, the emphasis shifts entirely. They focus not on the escape, but on the severe breach of systemic order and security. There is far less cultural space for celebrating an individual who so dramatically undermined authority.
that brings us to the final philosophical question. Why does this story, a 50-year-old heist with a known outcome of death or permanent disappearance, continue to resonate long after the FBI officially closed the active case in 2016?
Cooper transcends crime. He is pure mythology. He represents the unknowable and the vanishing American frontier. He is the ghost of a world that no longer exists.
A world before ubiquitous surveillance.
Before reliable DNA databases, before GPS tracking of every single person and device, before a digital footprint was mandatory for life.
His success, whether he survived or not, lies in what he refused to yield.
He refused to yield three things: a confession, an explanation, and most importantly, closure. In a society obsessed with data and resolution, Cooper remains a glitch in the matrix. He symbolizes the last true act of disappearing.
A final expression of anonymity that's just, it's no longer achievable in our modern biometric age.
Right. He asks us if it is still possible to truly disappear, not just physically, but meaningfully, and become a legend that permanently defies resolution.
And the fact that the remaining unspent $194,200 of unmarked, recorded $20 bills is still missing ensures case remains open, not in the court of law, but in the court of public imagination. That money, waiting somewhere in the dense Pacific Northwest, ensures that Dan Cooper, or D.B. Cooper, will always be waiting for us to find him.
That empty parachute harness, whether it landed safely or tragically, continues to swing in the wind of history, reminding us of the human need for stories that defy explanation and the enduring power of a secret tucked perfectly.